When the bell rings, the time is sacred. You've got just 5 minutes to take your opponent out. In the course of it all, the crowd noise and the adrenaline of being in a fight can make it a bit difficult to hear that bell when it's time to stop, so accidents do happen. But what about when fighters don't stop on purpose? Maybe pre-fight trash talk and ill feelings are boiling over. Maybe it's adrenaline and passion that take things beyond regulation. So today we're looking for relentless aggression after the fight is supposed to be over. I'm Tom from MMA On Point, and these are 10 times fighters weren't done after the bell. So before we get started, here's a quick side note. In this video, we're looking for instances that are a direct result of the fight itself. So that's going to have to rule out the Strikeforce brawl and the Khabib-Danis fiasco, since they were in many ways the result of outside actors provoking the chaos. Number 10, Bigfoot Silva versus Alistair Overeem. The build up to the fight between Antonio Bigfoot Silva and Alistair Overeem was pretty heated. Overeem was thought of as the most serious threat to the heavyweight title, but his test for elevated testosterone forced his withdrawal against then champion Junior Dos Santos. But he was still next in line and was expected to walk through fellow Strikeforce vet Bigfoot Silva. The Demolition Man believed every bit of his talk and made it very clear that he thought very little of his opponent, proudly declaring him as a stepping stone. So hands down, chin forward, Overeem showed the man in front of him just zero respect. So Bigfoot was more than happy to teach him a valuable lesson in the third round as he violently finished his overconfident opponent, seemingly propping his limp body up with the blows. Only that wasn't enough. Bigfoot stood over the fallen Dutch kickboxer and continued to yell sweet nothings. Herb Dean quickly moved in to separate the two, yet Bigfoot broke away to continue taunting over him, who was still completely dazed and out, as the world watched in shock of the Titan's fall. Number 9, Jorge Masvidal versus Ben Askren. Ben Askren's entrance into the UFC was accompanied with insults and callouts for nearly the entire welterweight division, with one target being Jorge Masvidal. After upsetting Darren Till and then in an unrelated incident giving Leon Edwards the infamous 3-piece and a soda backstage, Masvidal was scheduled to face Askren at UFC 239. Throughout the entire build-up, the two would trade insults, with Askren arguably getting the better of them and more laughter from the fans watching. Those laughs in Askren's favor would abruptly end as Masvidal set a record for the fastest KO in UFC history, landing a flying knee that would send the previously undefeated 19-0 wrestler out cold in just 5 seconds. As the stunned T-Mobile Arena watched, Masvidal wasted no time, landing 2 super necessary punches to his seemingly corpsed opponent and transitioning to one of the most outrageous, disrespectful, yet entertaining post-fight celebrations of all time. Verbal taunts? Check. Slapping the canvas for a pro wrestling style count? Check. Brutally imitating his rival's fall to the floor? Check. But Gamebred didn't stop there. At the post-fight press conference, he continued throwing darts at his fallen foe, even threatening to slap him in Whole Foods. Is anything sacred anymore? Number 8, Renato Sobral versus David Heath. This UFC 74 bout would mark the last time that Sobral would fight for the UFC, despite being one of the perennial top names in the then glamour division of light heavyweight. That's because after staining the floor with Heath's blood with heavy elbows from the top, Sobral's BJJ black belt came in handy to sink in an anaconda choke, so Heath tapped, but the choke was held just as tight. While the fight is supposed to continue until the ref stops it, Babalu then simply ignored those instructions, even looking Steve Mazzagatti in the eye while doing so, and put Heath to sleep. During his post-fight interview, Sobral made it very clear that he intentionally held the choke past regulation to teach Heath a lesson in respect for calling him motherfucker during the weigh-ins. Speaking to the Las Vegas Review-Journal later in the night, Babalu would double down even further, saying he didn't care about the crowd booing and further justified his actions. Neither the UFC nor the Nevada Athletic Commission would sympathize with Sobral's moral vigilantism, and he was fined $25,000, and Dana White would swiftly announce his release from the organization. Number 7, Paul Daley versus Josh Koscheck. Tough 1 veteran Josh Koscheck made a habit out of getting under people's skin. George St. Pierre, Chris Lieben, and even Tito Ortiz have all been antagonized by the NCAA wrestling champion. Paul Daley was no exception. Despite teasing that he'd oblige the British kickboxer and engage in a stand-up fight, Koscheck predictably took the path of least resistance instead and fought with a controlling ground game. Koscheck didn't let up on the trash talk during the fight, even faked absorbing an illegal knee to the head. He later admitted to ESPN that he taunted Daley about his speed and even spent the last minute of the round whispering lovely things in his ear. When the final horn sounded, Daley's frustration just boiled over as he went after Koscheck with his back turned and threw a left hook in a blatant sucker punch. Dana White would infamously boot the UK power puncher out of the UFC for good as a result of the foul. A grudge rematch was teased between the two when Koscheck made his way over to Bellator, but after a lengthy losing streak and a lackluster debut in Bellator, he opted to retire instead. Number 6, Joe Riggs versus Nick Diaz. When these two met at UFC 57, nothing really unusual happened. Riggs won a unanimous decision and was very complimentary of his opponent after the scorecards were read, and the two even exchanged handshakes, but somehow things between them ran cold after leaving the arena, culminating in an impromptu 4th round battle in the hospital whilst they were receiving medical treatment. Riggs, complete with an IV attached, walked by Diaz's room when the two exchanged words. According to Riggs, Diaz sucker punched him, dropping Diesel to one knee and knocking out a tooth. In response, Riggs clinched Diaz and unleashed knees and elbows until Nate hit him from behind. The way Diaz tells it, he only threw a punch when Riggs approached him after walking to his side of the hospital to talk trash. He goes on to say that he repeatedly punched Riggs while he unsuccessfully attempted a single leg takedown. The differing stories include Riggs' IV falling out, causing a horrific spray of blood, and both men falling into hospital equipment, knocking over trays, and eventually falling into a linen closet, and hospital security breaking up the melee, and the police officers humorously letting them go because they were fangirling out. Number 5, Rousimar Palhares. We could probably do an entire video based solely on the misadventures of Rousimar Palhares. His uncanny ability to find leg locks and love of submissions always seemed to cause trouble, however. First, there was Tomas Traval, who endured a vicious heel hook for far too long, earning Rousimar a suspension for 90 days. Since slaps on the wrist hardly ever do anything, Palhares would later repeat the offense against Mike Pierce, once again an extended heel hook. This time, the UFC took action by sending him his walking papers. Soon afterwards, he'd rebound in World Series of Fighting, where he'd win the promotion's welterweight strap and successfully defend it. But after catching Jake Shields in a Kimura, the former Strikeforce champion tapped, when once again Palhares held on long after the tap. Shields responded with his own post-fight punch, and after the fight, Shields also accused him pretty convincingly of eye gouging. Ultimately, the NAC would suspend Palhares for 2 years, fined him $40,000 for the habitual infraction, and he was stripped of his title and fired by WSOF. The then WSOF Vice President Ali Abdelaziz called him mentally unfit to compete, while a star-studded cast of Ray Sefo, Mazzagatti, who oversaw the bout, and Big John, who ironically was called in as a witness in support of Palhares, all testified against him in the commission hearing. Number 4, Renzo Gracie versus Ben Spikers. Way back in 1995, BJJ expert and lover of extracurricular violence, Renzo Gracie faced Dutch Olympic medal winning judoka Ben Spikers in the first round of the event's one-night tournament. According to Gracie, Spikers greeted him at the weigh-ins with insults as they squared off, which was followed by a non-stop barrage of prank calls allegedly from his camp to disrupt Renzo's sleep. So when it was fight time, the Brazilian was extra motivated to get the better of his opponent, and in just over 2.5 minutes, Renzo forced Spikers to tap out due to a collar choke, but Gracie wasn't satisfied with the sanctioned revenge. Cecil Peoples, yes, that Cecil Peoples, attempted to break the two up after the tap, and Renzo wasn't exactly eager to let the hold go. In fact, Spikers went limp as Peoples was struggling to make Renzo release his grip. Still not satisfied, Gracie kicked him as he was pulled away. If that was bad enough, he then walked on the back of Spikers' neck as he remained unconscious. Boos rained down afterwards while the commentary team expressed their outrage, and Renzo tried to make a half-hearted attempt at appearing sportsmanlike, but the crowd had none of it. Number 3, Sokoudjou versus Jan Norte. At Dream 9, Pride and UFC vet Sokoudjou and South African kickboxer Jan Norte met to kick off the first round of the Super Hulk tournament. Despite the enormous size difference, the fight was over very quickly and almost immediately as Sokoudjou went in for the kill, followed by blistering ground and pound. Norte couldn't regain his composure as hard shots compelled the ref enough to stop the fight. Apparently though, Sokoudjou hadn't done enough in his mind, so he just kept hammering away as if a man possessed. The ref had to further physically commit himself to the stoppage by leaning over Norte and was rewarded for his efforts by receiving a punch from Sokoudjou that finally made him realize he had to stop. For obvious reasons, Norte's corner, including kickboxing legend and current head of PFL Ray Sefo, took issue with his level of enthusiasm and had to be restrained by ringside officials. Surprisingly, the only reason given by Sokoudjou after the fact wasn't a grudge or personal beef with his opponent, but simply his desire to claw himself out of a 2-fight skid. In short, he didn't even care who he was fighting in that moment. Norte was just in his way. Poor dude. Number 2, Matthias Frederick versus Ahmad Aswad versus Leon Roberts. Herb Dean, Big John McCarthy and Mike Beltran owe a large part of their notoriety as standout referees to their time spent as students of combat disciplines or even competing in mixed martial arts. Direct experience and knowledge of positions and techniques make a massive difference. An Amateur Fight UK event, Leon Roberts would show another benefit to having a seasoned martial artist to be the third man in the cage. Toward the end of the opening round between Matthias Frederick and Ahmad Aswad, Frederick knocked Aswad out cold with a left hand, and Roberts immediately moved in to stop it. Even with Roberts coming between the two men, Frederick just kept punching as Aswad remained helpless, with Frederick showing no signs of slowing down the assault. So Roberts, he quickly took Frederick's back, got in hooks and threatened with a rear naked choke. The winning fighter was subdued quickly, whilst Roberts' quick thinking and submission skills stopped a bad situation from potentially being much worse. And number 1, Shinya Aoki versus Mizuto Hirota. Be warned, this one is fairly gruesome. While this bout was not a unification of Aoki's dream belt with Hirota's from Sengoku, there was clear bragging rights at stake as both organizations were competing to fill the void left by the now defunct Pride organization in Japan. Aoki took this task exceptionally seriously, as he almost immediately got Hirota on the floor, and once he was able to isolate an arm, it was the beginning of the end. Aoki secured a hammerlock and cranked it mercilessly. Whether it was brave, noble or stupid, depending on who you talk to, Hirota just refused to tap, so Aoki didn't let up and cranked the hold even harder. So look away now if you're squeamish.
Aoki applying the pressure.
Even after the break and the ref signaling the end of the bout, he had to stop Aoki from continuing to mangle the now badly broken arm. To add literal insult to injury, Aoki stood over a withering and defeated Hirota, giving him the middle finger. Furthermore, the submission specialist decided to share some of those friendly hand gestures with the crowd as well. He even doubled back to make more gestures towards Hirota as he was being attended to. Thanks so much to the Iron Man of MMA on Point, Ant Walker, for writing this script. You can follow him at Ant Walker MMA on Twitter. And thanks so much to the Sam Neela, the channel Max Randall. You see what I did there? He's British born, but living in New Zealand. Also, who doesn't like Jurassic Park? You can follow him at Max_Randall on Twitter. Thanks for watching that video. Please do like and subscribe. We upload 3 jaw-droppingly juicy MMA videos a week to get your teeth into, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Make sure to follow us at On Point MMA and Tom A. Ransom on Twitter, and you make sure you have a great day.